Um, Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm Ron Cavanaugh, Executive Director of the Literary Freedom Project. We're a Bronx-based nonprofit. We do primarily literary programs here in the Boogie Down Bronx. Been around for about 20 years. One Book, One Bronx is our book club. We started in a location at the Bronx Art Space and also at Casita Center for Arts and Education. Casita Maria brought us in to sort of manage their book club, and that's why we're here this evening. We partnered with them to just continue to bring you, I hope, great books, and I also hope that you all bring great conversation to the book club. I always say that, this is your book club. The book club is, if you come back week after week, it's because of you. There's nothing I'm saying that's bringing you back every week. It's the whole conversation that we have as a group that bring you all back, and I deeply appreciate that. So I think just trying to instill in everyone that this is your book club is the most important thing. With that said, we continue through My Sister by the Leyva sisters and Brandon Janice. Brandon is the facilitator. She will be leading the conversation throughout the evening. But, as we always say, anyone can sort of jump in and lead the conversation or take it off in a tangent if you so choose. Brandon's the leader in quotes, but anyone can lead the conversation. So Brandon, Janice, it's on you.
Thanks, Ron.
Take it away. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, truly, I just want to second that if anyone does want to talk a little more, even if it's not about the book, if it's about something relevant even to the culture, that would be, I think that would make the conversation more full, and like this whole experience more full, how many different voices are in it. So I guess I'll start off in that sense. These pages, chapters 5 through 9, we saw a lot of Marizol's friends, like the people who encouraged and supported and who taught her a lot about queerness in the queer world, New York City. I love that scene when she gets off at the West 4th stop. Because if you've been in New York, that energy really is there. Something about it does feel freer, homey. So I don't know, in that sense, anyone can jump in, but I would like to hear maybe some stories that you have of times in your life or people in your life that were similar to the friendships that Marizol creates and finds, like on MySpace, meets up and like finds this group of people who now like leads you into a new section of life that you would have never been in if you didn't meet them. People completely different outside of your family, who like change your life. Like Miranda changed her life, like forever. Just seeing her existence, seeing Miranda's existence changed Marizol's entire life. Does anyone want to talk about like someone you've met, people in your life who are like that? Who right when you met them, you became friends, they introduced you to something completely different and really truly like changed you? Does that make sense? That question? Yes, Linda.
Does it have to be a queer experience?
Oh no, God no. Any experience.
Oh, okay.
Your experience.
I did have a teacher, Mr. Jones. He was a Black man from my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught middle school French. He wanted to be, I think he wanted to be a French art historian, and he went to Paris and he learned French well enough that when he came back, he didn't follow up being a historian, but he did become a teacher. And as a Black man from my neighborhood, he always watched out for, I shouldn't say he always, but there was a group of us young boys, we were in junior high school, that he did watch out for and encourage us to go to better schools and to continue through college. And I've always remembered him. He actually died a couple years ago, but his name was Ronald Jones. And I'll never forget Mr. Jones. He definitely made a difference on, who I am and what he inspired in several of us young men in junior high school. Paul Lawrence Dunbar Junior High School. It was inevitable that I would be here.
That's beautiful. And that story you just shared is actually a lot more, I don't know, fuller than the first story that came to my mind. I was thinking of one of my friends. Her name was Autumn Sands, and this is probably in 5th grade. She had like the coolest shoes and like outfits, hats. She was an only child. I remember going over her house and like decorating her room with her. She like wasn't afraid to like play her music like really loud. There was something so free about her. It's actually really difficult to describe now that I'm having to, but there was something so free about Autumn that I remember like actively wanting, like actively, not even wanting, but actively feeling. Something about like friendships, just like that, people who encourage you. There's so much like freedom in that, like friendship is freedom, And so that was like, I don't know, the main thing that stuck out to me in these chapters was that support system that Marizol created for herself, but that it also existed. So I don't know, does anyone else have any like friendship stories they want to share?
I have a story I could share. I kind of shared part of it in the book club conversation of the book Amora, which was a couple of book clubs again before. And this is a queer story. So I had shared how I had been an activist in the Puerto Rican independence movement when I was very young, 18 to 28 years old. And my mother's Puerto Rican, my father's Jewish. And I had identified as a straight woman, but I knew something was wrong. I didn't feel comfortable in that experience. And there were no, quote, no gay women in the Puerto Rican independence movement. That's what we thought. There were gay men, but no gay women. I mean, I discovered probably 20 years later, I told this story of bumping into one of the women who I had been in the independence movement with, and she was out gay, and I had said to her, well, and I had made, at that point, I had made the move already. But anyway, she had said, oh yeah, you know, Carmencita and Maria, and she listed like 6 women, you know, who were gay in the Puerto Rican independence movement, who were not out. And so the part of the story is they kind of knew within each other, but there was no environment. And so after those first 10 years, you know, I kind of went on to do some other political work. And I was working with an organization that was interesting. It was men and women. It was gay and straight. It was Black, white, Latino, very mixed. And I walked into that environment, and there were like all of these straight women, or women who had lived their lives as straight women, who were now with other women. And there was this environment where it's like, it had a huge impact on me, because it was like, there I was in a community of people where there were a lot of straight women who were making that move. And it helped me see that I didn't have to be, as a queer woman, I didn't have to be somebody who knew it when I was 2 years old, you know, or 3 or 4 years old, that I could make that transition in my life if it felt like that was what felt right to me, because there was now a community of women, men and women, gay and straight. There were women who were lesbians and had always the whole life identified in that way. But there was this whole other phenomenon of all of these straight women who had come into this political movement, and in that context were given license to explore their sexuality and say, you know, maybe I don't really want to be with men. Maybe really what I've always wanted to be was with, maybe I never really wanted to be with men, but I didn't really know what else was there for me. And that was, you know, my transition. And that was the community and the space that created my ability to say, you know, I think I can try this. There's all these people here that, you know, are doing this and making that, you know, transition and moving into that lifestyle. And I think I can do that. And then I did. So I'll share that story.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. These are good. Does anyone else have something that they'd like to share?
I don't have a story per se, but you know, when you think about your teenage years, all you want to do is belong. And as adults, that's the same thing. We want to belong. And I could just feel that as Jose is trying to figure out who he is. And it's just pieces of a puzzle you put together to find out where you fit, who do you belong. So I think that's just so relevant to all of us. And as everyone's talking, I just think about the need to belong, how strong that is for all age levels. And just that friendship, how critical that is. And, you know, finally, it's like the pieces are coming together. She's figuring out who she could be.
I agree with Sherry. You know, seeing like teens and they're really just wanting to, like she said, belong, especially from their peer groups, you know. And Jose as a teenager didn't have that. So watching him transition to Marisol, and she was finding that sense of community, I thought it was really important. And as I was reading it, it was really kind of like liberating to read it too, right? Like you were happy for her that she had finally found like a sense of community, a sense where she was belong, something that it seemed like she was searching for that she couldn't necessarily get from the family. And yeah, she's kind of creating her own family, right?
And it was also just nice to watch that develop, especially after the failed attempt with the Sweet 16 Mardi Gras bash.
Yeah, it was sad.
So it was nice though to watch though that evolution, kind of happen from having no community and no support to having so much support in this beautiful community that you can come back and fill that arena. There was something very rewarding to me about that, like those two scenes.
Yeah, I agree. And as you like put them next to each other, it's just like you felt so bad about that whole scene, right? Like that whole, because Jose as a teenager wasn't comfortable in his own skin, so that was kind of like it kind of like echoed through the party, like with the whole girlfriend and everybody kind of secretly laughing about it.
And also the way he had to restrain himself in the build up to that, right? So the furthest extent he went to was getting his eyebrows done, right? He was thinking about, oh, if only I could have worn, the kind of elaborate dress that I've seen my sister wear, or the kind of shoes she wore. So he wound up having to settle for, a reduced version of his inner self, and it counted for something, at least to a degree. But even the facade of it, well, obviously was not satisfying even to him after a while.
I don't know. It seems like they ended on like a good note, though. No, they ended like very happy, right? Like the family was there, everybody was dancing.
I think that was probably definitely like the memory of it, but probably being in it as a teenager, like he probably also felt like just really rejected, that he didn't have any of his peers, because you could tell that when she writes how she kept looking right at the entrance for like people to come and like people to like kind of like surprise her. So I don't know. I when I was reading, I was like, damn, this is sad.
Yeah, me too.
What was interesting about that sort of dual description is when Selenis describes it, she's really harsh on what it looked like, because she has a certain perspective about what happened, and she's like, it was, it sucked as a party. But one thing I understand you have a party and people don't come, but I don't know, and this is me being naive, why didn't people come to his party? Because he was queer?
Wrong people too. Because remember, he didn't invite Justin, who was obviously his friend and who would have came. Maybe he invited the usual suspects or that.
Right. And it seemed like also like the stigma with it, right? That they would go to what they considered the gay boys' party.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like, the other teenagers, like they also want to feel, sorry.
No, I think too, to your point, Rondo, I didn't get as much from the story. Like I couldn't figure that out either. Like it didn't seem that, that deep. I was like, you have a party, you send invitations. I guess you assume people are gonna come. So I don't know, I guess like it was because he was gay, but I didn't get, that it was that deep also. So I don't know if that was like the writing or just my perception, but I don't know. I didn't understand why nobody came.
I think we underestimate how cruel kids are at that age, and they did not want to risk their own status as being cool by showing up at the party.
Right, makes sense.
And I think for me, it showed how out of touch Jose, when he was Jose, was about how people were actually perceiving him. I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe that was right. Maybe he didn't realize how he really looked to everybody else. That makes sense. I think he was just really like repressing, like the notion that everybody else was looking at him like he was gay. And I think that's why he was so surprised. It was. I think the party was like an awakening, like a realization for him that that's why nobody came.
Right, and every time
nobody came.
Sorry, and and every time he told people he was gay, I mean, this is after the party, like everybody laughed and was like, "Yeah, we know," like so you said that, like his perception of himself just right, it didn't line up.
I definitely agree with that. It seemed like, you know, he had his group of people that he identified as his friends, and then there was a group of people that he knew bullied him. And when he saw those lines blurred by the people not showing up at the party, it probably made her realize that her friends were rejecting her as well. Like, even when the mother came to get her girlfriend, the way that it was written, like the mother snatched the girlfriend out of there, like she shouldn't be there. I think it was portrayed there too about what that meant if you were attending Jose's party and, you know, being associated with Jose as a friend.
Yeah, and even the way he was telling the story, like, oh, her mom just came to get her. Rather she, and then right when the sister was telling it, you know, the mom snatched the girl, you know. So it's again like that perception of things.
And I also thought it was the whole stigma, right, with being gay and how it is really isolating. Still, you know, and then reading that, it was just like, wow, like, you know, this still happens to children where they're constantly like marginalized or like made to be othered.
I also think that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Latasha.
Sorry about that. I'm just going to agree. I think that was why at that point, Selenis used that as a moment to remind parents to teach your children to be accepting of others and teach your children to be open so that doesn't happen. And so kids aren't afraid, you know, to be friends with somebody that might be perceived as being different.
It also feels like at that age, when you invite somebody to a party, you're actually inviting their parents, and then their parents are giving permission to the child. So you're dealing with a lot of the hangups, not so much of the kids, but of the parents of the kids. I mean, you know, there are some kids who can go to parties on their own at that age, but a lot of kids at that age have to get permission from their parents still, you know, when you're in middle school, junior high, to go to a party, so.
And also I thought that Justin, the friend Justin, was kind of what Jose could have been if they had found themselves sooner, if they had been more comfortable with themselves sooner. Because there was this scene when Justin performs Toxic by Britney Spears, and they say everyone, you know, some people were laughing, some kids were laughing, but mostly everyone like cheered him on, you know. And I kind of felt like I was there for a minute, like in like that small auditorium, like watching him at the talent show perform Toxic by Britney Spears. And I think that scene was so powerful. And then Justin, even though he was a sliver of a character, was so powerful because he had represented what Jose perhaps could have been, or maybe who perhaps they wanted to be at that time.
And you see that rejection of Justin as well, right? Because Jose was like, well, he's my friend, but not really, because then if I hang around, then people are going to think that I'm gay too.
Mm-hmm. Which obviously,
so that rejection that he's experiencing, he's kind of also, you know, rejecting as well.
Exactly.
I'm going to agree with all of you guys because I used to work in a high school, and the kids that were gay and transgendered were really treated bad by teachers, by other kids. They had to hide. And I assume, just like everyone else was saying, it's part of it is that they weren't really his friend, because he said he wanted to invite Justin because Justin was more accepting, but nobody wanted to be that gay kid. Just like a lot of kids wouldn't go to groups that are with even for allies of gay kids, they won't go because they're fearful that they would be considered. There was this program in the school, and one of the kids was saying, oh, the only reason I went was because there was pizza, there was free pizza. But in actuality, he went because he was a member of the community.
That idea of having to hide yourself or mask yourself is so heavy to me. You know, like that's work, you know. It's work to have to, even that young, to have to be ducking and dodging people's opinions of you, you know, making up stories about the communities that you spend time with.
Particularly in the midst of adolescence.
Yeah.
We're like, everything is drama.
But then when Jose does lean into himself, they get to you know, go full circle and go back to that same place with his friends, you know, with their friends, with the community, and with their family. So it is something
excuse me.
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
I just feel there's like a lot of denial. It's like a chaotic existence. It's a dual existence. He doesn't know what to do, I guess. You know, he doesn't know who to be. Trying to keep it hidden from his father, although they know. It's to me very chaotic, as you said, Brendan. That it's just like he doesn't know what to do, where to be, how to act. And it wasn't until a little bit later that he actually started saying that he was gay, you know, once he confessed to his friend. But it's like it's so many oddities with it, I think, you know. And I don't know if that's because of the family, or maybe he didn't have the words yet to articulate how he was feeling. But it seems just a very chaotic dual existence is the thing that I think about when thinking about Jose.
I was also thinking that the fact that Jose was transgender and not just gay, like there wasn't a language for it, there wasn't even a concept of it, you know, like even in the general culture, like, I mean, like in the school, nobody is saying until the end of that chapter where Selenis says, are you a woman? You want to be a woman? Like, nobody around him said, oh, are you a woman? No, they said, are you gay? And that wasn't exactly for him, you know, as Jose, it didn't fit. You know, if he was just a young gay boy, like it would fit. And he might be ashamed of it. He might keep it on the down low, but he would identify with it. Like even internally, he would identify and say, yeah, I'm gay. It's really hard to be gay. But in this experience of being transgender, like there was no model, there was no word for it, name for it. So he was just, I think that was an added pain in terms of being split, which was that he kind of knew he wasn't gay, like Justin. He knew what he was, but there was nobody before Selenis said to him, do you want to be a woman? That anybody had put those words and allowed him to even say, yeah, actually, that is who I am. Can I say that? Can I be that?
Yep. He said he was excited when he was given the permission to even considering separating his sexuality from his gender identity. He said it was exciting. So you're right. His sister opened that door for him.
Did she know she was doing that? Or was she asking that?
I don't know if she knew
I feel like
that,
she was
but
breastfeeding.
like Anais just said, he was scared at first and confused, so, and he didn't want to be thought of as a freak. So I don't know if she knew that she was doing that for him or not, because I don't know if he ever told her that. And that was at the end of that chapter.
Mm-hmm. When she,
But
that
I
was
don't
right
think
after.
that she had to tell him because she knew that he was stealing her heels, her clothes, stuff like that.
Oh
So
yeah, you're right. You're right. But I
so
guess
she
what I'm
was
saying
kind of
is like
putting
what.
the pieces of the puzzle together. Because remember when
Yeah.
Marizol's telling the story, it's like everything's done in secrecy. Me from like trying on the clothes to meeting the boy from Staten Island, like everything is done
Mm-hmm.
in secrecy. And I thought it was interesting because it's just like, this Marisol or Jose at the time didn't have any role models until later on. So it was just like he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know the potential dangers that he was putting himself into because he was kind of mesmerized by this kind of life that he was trying to discover.
Right. Even when he went to Staten Island to meet, I can't remember the young man in Staten
Jaden.
Island. What was his name?
I think it was Jaden.
Yeah,
Jaden.
Jaden.
It was like Jose was like really like disappointed. Like when he saw that Jaden was like like a femme gay boy, it's like, I didn't come all the way to Staten Island for that. I thought you were a boy in the hood. Like he was saying, like when his picture was like, oh, like this is some kind of really masculine gay man or masculine man who's on this, MySpace. And that's what he was drawn to. So it was like even that was, like him still trying to figure out, like, no, I'm not gay. I'm not attracted to Jaden as a femme. No, I want a real man. And that's what a transgender man transitioning to a woman is attracted to women because they see them, attracted to men because they experience themselves as a woman.
Well, that's also not true for everybody though. So we can't.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you can even say that because I think it's different for everyone. But
what do you mean for every transgender person? When you said
right, for everyone who transitions, I don't think it's
oh, okay.
I don't think you can say that because I want to say, for example, Caitlyn Jenner is that is a very famous case, and she wouldn't make that. She doesn't fit that bill, that you just described. So I think we should have this conversation like this, right? So and like talk like this openly, and so we can maybe like I want this to be a space we can say something that maybe isn't sensitive as you may think it is, and like that'd be okay. We can just kind of like, I'm not like correcting you. I guess I'm saying all that to say I'm not correcting you, but I don't think we should put people's personal identities, personal sexual preferences in any type of boxes.
Yeah, I accept that. I accept that.
Also, I think in terms of the genre of book we're reading as well, as far as the memoir, it isn't going to be representative of the entire trans community. It is this one person's, and you could read others as well. First one I read Janet Mock's. She's got one as well. But it isn't like a critical analysis of what it means to be trans. It is what this person's going through. But I'm pleased with the fact that she does go to the lengths to describe the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity. She goes through the lengths in that last chapter we had to read about socially transitioning and medically transitioning. Because I feel like it's a lot of things that people might not really know or be aware of. So I feel like that's crucial that she's bringing up those things and explaining them in detail. Because it's easy to flatten the experience just based on one story you're reading.
Absolutely. Has anyone ever been to the New Eurekan Cafe that Selenis mentions she had the comedy trio in? No one's ever been there?
Ron. Barbara.
Ron, have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah. It's a nice spot. It's kind of grungy, but I know they fixed it up. It's nice. I can see her in there performing as part of a greater troupe, because they do mixed performances in there. You know, it's not just poetry. It's more theater than anything else, but I've seen panel discussions in there, regular readings. They have a nice bar, so.
Yeah, I found some really, some cool images I'll share with y'all from the New Eurekan Cafe.
And one of the founders recently passed, Miguel Algadin, I believe that's it. Thank you. He recently passed.
I really liked how with these chapters 5 through 9, there was like a nice piece of like history, I guess, of going along with the story. When Marizol is talking about the riots, downtown Stonewall riots, and she's talking about Christopher Street and the Golden Walk, like there was really something nice like about that section that she broke down her identity kind of like right alongside New York history. Does anyone know what I'm talking about or can relate?
I mean, yeah, and that world only opens up to her because of fostering that relationship with Miranda. If she didn't reach out to Miranda on MySpace and they agreed to meet, it was like, you want to talk about night and day, and that's only a year apart. Like, she was 16 at that sad party, and then she's 17 when she meets Miranda and befriends all these other people, and now it's this whole new world that's being opened up to her.
You know what I always find interesting about Christopher Street, and maybe I'm on that street for different purposes, but it's always a sad street. Every time I walk down it, it makes me wonder, like, how did this street become such the center of a community? There seems to be more vibrant spaces and streets and neighborhoods, but I often wonder, like, how did Christopher Street become such a mecca for the queer community?
You know what, I'm gonna put some stuff in the chat, because I had that question too when I was reading these pages, and I did find a couple videos and articles that I think will help answer.
Thank you.
And I think also Christopher Street is like a rite of passage for young Black and Latino gay youth who kind of like, you know, whether they're living in their neighborhoods or like in Harlem or the Bronx, you know, that's kind of a space where you may not be able to express your authentic self or what you interpret as your authentic self at the time, but going down to those spaces, and Christopher Street is kind of like a safe space for that.
Yeah. But how did it become a safe space? Like, was it just arbitrary? Was there some literal space on Christopher Street where the gay community felt, you know, that migrated to? Like, was there a club on Christopher Street that?
Ron, how far is the Stone, that club where they're actually
Stonewall?
Yeah, how far is it? Christopher?
I thought it was on Christopher Street. I thought the Stonewall Inn was on Christopher Street.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
But it's in that area because the village has always been that. That's like it's written in New York history.
It is on Christopher. So. It is on Christopher.
Yeah.
double
So
check.
that's probably what started it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you.
And also, it's important not to conflate, once again, with gay and trans, not conflating the two. And I think a really good source for this, for those who haven't watched it, is the FX show Pose. And I couldn't help but think of it while reading this last chapter, because a lot of it kind of draws on that same history. It takes place in the 80s and 90s in that scene. Christopher Street Piers, all of that, goes through all of that. And how frequently the gay community was very much separating themselves from trans because they thought they were too out there. Like gay people want their own, we're still fighting for their rights. Well, not cis, but cisgender gays were, you know, more concerned with protecting their own rights or trying to gain their own rights. So the trans community was seen as kind of a threat, and the show really kind of accentuates that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Pose was really good. And I really compare it a lot to this book and all the things that are happening. And it's interesting.
And just seeing the whole physical space, right, of Christopher Street and that whole pier area, like, you know, this marginalized population being pushed to the side.
You know, sometimes when you look at Pose, it does seem like such a rough and marginalized existence. And you also see it in the documentary Paris is Burning, where they also spend a bit of time on the piers, and you know, they follow some of the queer young people and how tough their lives are and were. You know, in the documentary, there's one woman who is killed. You know, and they kind of go into that. So.
But I think also with this, what just kind of stood out for me is that when the sister's talking, like I feel, I don't know, the concern or the you know, the difference about being trans and the danger, and whereas the, you know, Jose, he just, I don't know if it's because he's younger, it's his age. You know, I don't get a sense that he really understands what's happening. Like even when he went to Staten Island, you know, he didn't understand like the danger of meeting someone online, what could possibly happen to you. And I don't know, the sister's point of view just seemed, she just seemed more nervous, or she seemed more scared. You know, and again, perhaps because she's older. I don't know if anybody else felt that way.
And I think also the reality, right, that that the LGBTQ, like gays and trans, are the most targeted and killed. So I think she had that fear, like, you know, that she definitely didn't want anything to happen to Jose at the time, because she worked on Law and Order, so she knew.
Yeah, I thought that was funny when she said.
No, you know, that's funny you say that, because I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, when she asked them right after the encounter and the police were at the house and she slapped them in the kitchen and then they went upstairs to the attic, after all of that, when she asked, do you want to be a woman? That's why I'm questioning if she was asking that with an informed decision, or with some sort of frame of reference that she knew she was asking about being transgendered, or was she just asking that, for a lack of better words, almost out of ignorance?
Right, that's another time, again, it just was like a leap. You just went from, I'm gay, do you want to be a woman? Like, again, I understood like the trying on the clothes, and there were different events in the story that led up to that. But I mean, maybe it's just me. It's not coming together for me that Jose really wanted to be a woman. And that could just be, you know, I don't know if it's me, if it's the book, or I'm waiting for something, and I'm not really hearing it.
Part of me likes that, though. I agree with you 100%. And part of me kind of likes that. It kind of likes how it's just as simple as someone growing up being straight. That not boring, but that mundane, that innate.
Makes sense.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
I felt that Selenis asked, do you want to be a woman, out of fear. Her brain had just gone crazy that he was missing, well, that he'd gone out, and she knew how dangerous it was. I just think her mind was going crazy because I know how I would react. And in all of this, I think about teenage adolescent behaviors, as Ron was talking about earlier. Adolescent behaviors, they do quirky things, crazy things all the time. And I think Selenis was just so unnerved. Her mind, you know, her brain was firing crazy. And that's when she asked, do you want to be a woman? I think it was just out of fear, and randomly she shot that out.
I had this thought in terms of what you were saying, Rachel, earlier about whether you, as the course of the book, had a sense of that coming on, or I guess for me, like the Christmas gifts. And this is when, you know, Jose is 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and he's getting a football and he's getting a truck, and he's so demoralized, and then he's just checks out, and he's looking at his little sister's toys and the Barbie dolls. And like, for me, it was like all of these ways in which it was clear that at such a young age, he was clearly not wanting what little boys want or supposed to want, and that it was very innate because he was so young, that then a little later on, when he's, you know, combing Selenis' hair and doing her nails, and he's just doing all of these things that are not typically male. And I get it that we could think, oh, he's just gay, because that's what Selenis did. She went to one of her gay friends and said, you know, is that gay, you know, to want to dress up in women's clothes and put on heels? And her gay friend said, oh yes, that's very gay. But I don't think maybe there was that understanding of that distinction between gay and transgender and wanting to be a woman. And I was thinking, when the incident happened, when he went to Staten Island, he was 16 or 17, just like around that time after the 16 party. And Selenis is 10 years older than him. And she was married already. She came from her husband's house. She was called and came. She wasn't living there anymore. She was an adult. She's 26, 27. She's working on Law and Order. And I'm thinking she's probably more worldly now. She's probably more aware that there isn't just this gay thing, that there's also this transgender thing. And her having grown up with Jose, and always, as she says it in the book, always so sensitive to these ways in which he wasn't acting like a boy and acting more like a girl and wanting to be like a girl. For me, that's where I thought that came from. Like, finally, as an adult on her own, out in the world, married, working, she finally got it, or she finally kind of put that together, or maybe even just took a shot at asking, is that what this is about?
Yeah, and if I don't know if I remember accurately, but then there was like no answer about that, right? There was no confirmation about that, right?
You know, it's the last sentence in that chapter.
Yeah,
it's a whole new section of the book.
Yeah, it's intentionally left hanging because we know the answer.
Right.
But it'd be interesting to know, in that actual conversation, like, what was the answer? Was it him denying, probably denying, right?
Well, what he was willing to admit was being gay, though. Like, the fact that he was giggling when he responded and saying, oh, well, I'm gay. And then Selenis says, oh, well, I know. So he was willing to go that far because at this rate, the jig was up. he got caught going to Staten Island trying to meet this boy. So there's only so much you're willing to admit to in that moment. And like we've said, I mean, he didn't have the language for it really until he met Miranda later on to even consider what it means to be trans. So I would think he probably was flustered, bumbling his words, and not coming out with a straight answer in response to that question.
Yeah, and I don't think he knew either. But I think he also knew that at that time, at least, even gay felt not right, but it felt more right than straight and having a girlfriend thing. You know, like whatever, you know, kind of terms he was using, I felt he was kind of getting there, getting somewhere. He knew it wasn't straight, so maybe it's gay. I felt like that was actually nice, kind of having that tension. It's not like he was coming out and proud, you know. He was like, I'm gay. That's kind of like how it was nice having that confusion, even around those kind of first steps.
Yeah, and the way they set it up too, like that whole embarrassment, right, of being kind of like dragged out the closet. It's like the police are there, the whole family's there, like everybody's seeing the lights in front of the house, and it's just like it definitely built the drama.
I actually just thought it was really funny that he saw the boy in Staten Island and he was like, he's too feminine. I just thought that was really, I don't know. I was just like, so all of this, like, you know, I don't know. I just thought that was really funny.
Right.
Yeah, I really
Rachel's done skipped school, you done planned everything,
Right.
anticipated everything. It was just like a bit like rode the Staten Island ferry, afraid of getting caught. All that you see that he went through on that journey,
Right.
just to be like kind of disappointed.
And that it was just, and again, that it just didn't go wrong. Like, in fact, you know, like the sister was so scared someone was gonna, you know, hurt him. And, you know, he ended up meeting this guy that was more feminine, I guess, than him. You know what I mean? It was just, they just always had two different perceptions of what was going on.
It also points to how layered and complex this conversation is if we just let it be and we stop trying to put people, you know, and we've stopped already, but there's a whole political party dedicated to not listening to this conversation, you know, and it's just interesting that no matter how many stories are written to sort of expand the conversation, there are people still committed to ignoring that aspect of our society.
No, and I agree. And even what Brandon was saying is that the story's kind of unfolding like normally. Like it's not like we all have had those experiences. Like we went out and we went through and we met the person that we really didn't like, and you know, we thought it was going to be something, and that's even happening, you know, in the trans community, or that's, you know what I mean. It's still just, you know, you know what I mean. Like it was just like a regular story, skipping school, and it didn't end tragically, and it doesn't have to. And our expectation, because I know when I was reading it, rather listening to it, I was just like, oh God, oh, he's on the train, he's going to Staten Island, like, oh my God, you know, I thought something bad was going to happen, and it just ended up like a normal high school story, you know. And I did appreciate that.
I kept thinking Saeed when I read that. It was because if this were Saeed's memoir, something, you know, he would have been beaten up, right, or something. And so I had that same feeling too. I thought, oh my God, this poor kid, he's walking into a trap.
I think for me, just an overall sense of being naive. It's just like, they don't know. Then again, they somewhat know. And it's just very naive, very, maybe very limited knowledge on the situation, I guess, because we talked about them having the language and the words, but still just extremely naive. And that wasn't so long ago. you know, there should have been some conversations among the family. You know, we think this, you know, we observed that he's behaving like this. And just, to me, just keeping it just so hidden, naive, not talking about it, you know, keeping it from the father, which the father already knew pretty much. But just that whole overall tone of being naive about the whole situation.
You're right too, because he said that he always identified as a female, and it was true even as a child, but then he didn't have the language to describe it until later. You're right, he says that. And then when he was able to, when he had the language to describe it, he didn't have the courage to live out openly in the world as his true self. So you're correct, he didn't have the language. And then when he did get it, it's like, okay, I don't have the guts to get out here like this. So, and then that on that same page is at the bottom is when his sister, you know, said, do you want to be a woman, or you want to be a woman, or whatever. So, and then he's excited. So it looks like it's coming together.
Also, just we can't take for granted just how much the culture has moved in recent years. Like when this was happening 15, 16 years ago, people were not talking about the trans experience. I mean, you were seeing queer representation more in TV and media. But as far as trans, like even now, it's pretty limited. It's better than it was. People know the vernacular a bit more, but it's still pretty limited. So even then, to expect these people who, you know, were definitely not immersed in this world to understand it, I don't think really anyone outside of people in that community really had the language for it at the time.
Right. And then, and I remember when Janet Mock, I remember when she was, you know, when she made her transition or whatever, and she put her book out and everything and talked about how, you know, even as a little boy, she knew, you know. And then I don't know if there was a series back then. It seemed like there was. I don't know if it was surrounded by her or just other people who wanted to make the transition like she did way back then.
There's also a good documentary on Netflix called Disclosure that kind of talks about those Hollywood representations of trans people and how it was like, you know, that they were like comedy figures kind of, you know, so not taken seriously. It was a really good documentary. So you could see the apprehension of someone who may be trans, like really trying to come into their own with no visual representation, but the representation that is shown is like a complete kind of like a disgrace or a made mockery of.
I think that's how it always starts too. When any sort of marginalized group starts to get representation, it's in a mocking form. I mean, you could argue that it's never changed yet, even for gay people, that, you know, their representations in the media were always very stereotypical, going back as recent as maybe 5-10 years ago. And now you're starting to see more nuanced portrayals, I would say, in recent years. And even with the trans community, we could say we're seeing more nuanced portrayals with things like Pose. You know, you have actresses like Laverne Cox out there as well, who are very popular, but still, you know, very limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? This actually reminds me of an interview I did recently with 3 Black trans women. I just attached it in the chat as the PDF. And a lot of like the things we're saying now, they say, I guess, more concretely because they are Black trans fans. And it's a very powerful read. So I'll leave it there if anyone kind of wants to dig into the trans culture a little bit more from the perspective of Black trans person in New York. So before we go, one thing I did want to bring up was the reason, maybe some thoughts on how was the brother Tito was the brother that got sick, right? I think it was Tito who got sick. How when Tito got sick, the family completely, like, you know, banded behind him. The father shows this extreme act of devotion. And then when Jose is, even as a child, it's clear that he's like, I think she even uses the word, Selenis uses the word sashaying, like around and like very sassy. I wondered, kind of once I got to towards the end of this chapter, one thought I had was, what did y'all think? Like, we know that the parents didn't really, you know, have the language or anything. No one in the family, it seemed, was even queer at all, at least out. So there was nothing like to go off of. But once they even seen as a child that Jose was different in that aspect, I thought about this, like, what do you guys think that they were kind of going through mentally? Like, because this type of change is very big on like the whole family. Everyone kind of has to like level up in a sense, and change their way of thinking to like love their family. So in that sense, like, because we've seen how committed and how faithful these parents are. Like, in that sense, like, what do you guys, do you have any thoughts, I guess, on the maybe mental space of the parents at that time when they had to address Jose as at very least gay when he was in high school? Did anyone think about that? Like,
it didn't seem like it was something that they felt that they needed to address or deal with. It came across to me as something that they felt was something more so that needed to be corrected. Like, if he was being a boy and he was effeminate, that was something they could say stop it or cure it with getting him, you know, a truck or a football, and reminding him, reiterating what he was supposed to be acting like. I don't even think it came across, it crossed their minds that it was something that they had to accept. It was something that he had to fix. And I think that's how I received it.
fascinating. Thank you so much for that. What did anyone else think?
Hi, this is Liliana. To be quite honest, it's like, you know, like Caribbean parents, Hispanic, and I don't really think that they address it. It's something that they just hid under the rug, and something that I guess they thought that maybe if we like pretend that it's not there, he probably will forget about it, kind of situation. Like, maybe this is just a stage or something that he's going through. So if we don't make a big deal, it will probably go away. Because reading through the pages, I never got the sense that that's something they never talk about it. Like, even this, like, they just kind of knew, but never said anything about. So I just felt like, you know, something that they didn't want to address at the end of the day, especially because of the father. So I never felt like they wanted to talk. And I feel like the experience of him possibly getting her, you know, I think that's what pushed her sister to actually have that conversation with her. And so I don't think if something like that would have happened, I don't think that the conversation would have even come out at the end of the day. So I really don't feel like they were trying to talk about it.
Yeah, even when like they're finding the Sully's clothes all over Jose's space, and the mother and Sally they pick up the clothes, they give each other a look, and they move on. They keep it moving. I think that's typical of how families in the Black and Brown community tend to handle things like that. They don't. It's like, okay, yeah, we know this, and keep it moving.
But for example, I hear all of you, and I agree. But for example, y'all don't think that the parents started to accept it a little bit? Maybe we just don't get the conversation, but I guess what I feel is that once the police were, you know, at the door and that whole chaotic situation happened, I thought that that was almost like an impetus for the conversation to happen, because I felt something change after that. Remember, he had the huge party, you know, his friends, they obviously were, you know, not straight, you know. The party that he had, those were, he said there was voguing going on. So that time, you know, had to have been a time that their parents knew know what was going on. Was that just me kind of feeling that at one point they accepted it, but didn't say they accepted it? Does that make sense?
I can understand why that assumption is being made, but at the same time, you'll notice that they're not explicitly talked about in that last chapter. So after he comes home from Staten Island and that disastrous reaction, and then he's able to, or she's able to start embracing herself, and Selenis is helping, and they're at this party. She goes to the Kiki balls. The parents aren't really talked about, so we can't really say that they've accepted it or turned more hostile. All I can say is that I thought it would have definitely escalated it with the following chapter, and you would hear more of like, oh, and my parents, they stopped talking to me, they stopped doing this, but he doesn't, or she doesn't really talk about them at all, at least at this point, after that incident. So it makes me curious, like, all right, well, how long-term, how did they really take this?
Yeah.
Once the cops left and everything.
It definitely does, Brandon, because I mean, it sounds like they're accepting, but then you also don't know, right? Because he mentions that she mentions that Miranda used to stay at the house, but then Miranda was also passing too, right? So it was like, would the parents necessarily know that this was a trans girl at the house staying over and all that? So we don't get all of that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I guess that really solidified for me after, I think, especially after I read that, I was like, oh, Miranda's coming over? They're definitely cool with it. I guess not, though. You're right, Greg. We don't really get that information. But I think I just assumed that since they weren't out on the street, you know, that they had been accepted. I guess I think I just assumed that.
Definitely thought it'd be a worse reaction. Not to say that she or he's not being traumatized this whole time, but I definitely expected it to be a worse reaction, more violent reaction. I mean, the father clearly was trying to enact some violence on him, but was stopped. But I think it could have gone about 1,000,000 times worse when he got home.
Yes, because I was thinking like, whoa, they were running, you know, when they were playing with the barrettes and the brushes. So now to actually be coming out and kind of to get no real scene as to how the parents felt or even a line. That is one question that I had, that I don't know. I kind of wanted to hear what was on everyone's mind. But yeah, were there any other, we have about 15 minutes left. Were there any other themes or topics that came up that we haven't touched on yet that anyone would like to invite in this space?
One of the things I felt for then Jose is when Selenis has her sweet 16, and it is this huge, extravagant affair. And then I think this is what kind of set up Jose. You know, then when he has his, or it's not a sweet 16, but when he has what he believes might be the equivalent, it pales in comparison. And, you know, that kind of sibling peer trauma that comes from trying to compete with someone in your family who it seems like he almost idolizes, because, I mean, it's, of course, she is the older sister, and he is also like, you know, every chance he gets, he's wearing her clothes. Let me take that back. Not every chance, but when the opportunity strikes, you know, he is trying to wear her clothes. And now suddenly you go and try to have a party, the equivalent of this older sibling that you really idolize, and it just hits so hard in the wrong direction. That's kind of like, because the way Selenis describes her Sweet 16, you know, it took a year to plan. There were monthly rehearsals. This is serious business. And then for Jose's party to sort of hit so flat just really made me feel for him.
Yeah.
Because I had and really have no idea as to, I mean, I know what it entails now, but Sweet 16s can be quite serious events. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, what kind of adds to that story is that at the time, I think they mentioned it. At the time, that show, My Super Sweet 16 was on air on MTV. It was airing regularly, and that is a show that they would watch. So it kind of hits even twice to your point, whereas, you know, it's one thing to kind of, you know, just watch it on TV and wish it was you, but then to see it is your sister and not you, that can be a big blow to the fragile teenage ego.
And then I also think too, the whole thing with, like you said, coming full circle with the club experience, right? And packing out the club and it being like a year later, right? Because she says that she's 17 and then, you know, that she wanted to drink and all of that, but she was able to kind of like have a redo.
Yeah, they just had to find a squad. They just had to find their people, you know, and like find that freedom. It's so much easier to be yourself once you find who you are within, you know, a group of people. For some people, that's their immediate family, the people they grew up with, you know, and for some people, they have to go find that family, find that group of people you can be totally yourself with, who you trust, who you're also loyal to. It's so like it's just rewarding. It's like the highest level of friendship you can have, and then it's so much easier just to be yourself without them. Be yourself on your own life in public, because you've already expressed it, you know. And I think that as much as Selenis maybe wanted to growing up, she couldn't be that to then Jose. She couldn't, you know, because I think, thank God, she was an actress and she was, you know, she was going downtown every day to LaGuardia. She was seeing other things that weren't just that small knit community in the Bronx. So she was, in a sense, like then Jose's like biggest ally and not even knowing it, you know, kind of just by being herself, by being who she is. She was able to be Jose's biggest ally, even if she didn't have the language all of the time. So that idea, I don't know, of connection was really powerful to me when I was finishing up these pages and thinking back on people who I grew up with, who I can't imagine like my life without, or the things that I've learned from my aunts and my mom. So I know that's a little deeper than like what was on the page, but I think that's kind of the bigger thought that I had when I was getting towards the end, was just that, damn, you really need friends. Like you really need that group of people, or family, you know, but you really need them to be able to become the fullest version, you know, of yourself.
Yeah, and I thought that was powerful too, because she's able to name herself, right? And they're the ones who encourage that.
Yeah. And they were not weird about it. You know, nothing was weird at that Golden Walk, you know? And I've walked past there 1,000 times. It's so small. but it was nice to kind of have her mention that, and then you think about kind of her back then eating there. But yeah, it was so it was just so nice to like feel like you were there in those moments when she is with her friends, learning, growing. What were they called? The Crazy Eights. Oh, that beautiful scene where she loses the competition, but like went for it. I think that was really powerful. Do y'all remember that scene?
Yeah, she wouldn't have done that if it was a year prior. Like that shows you the growth. Like she wouldn't have been ready for that if it was just 1 year earlier.
Yeah, she wouldn't even have the friends to be in that space. You see what I'm saying? She wouldn't even have no reason to even be there. So that was really nice to watch.
I mean, it's about finding like the right environment in order to thrive, and this is just in a general sense as well. It's just like if you're not surrounded by the right people, if you're placed in the wrong environments, you can internalize so much terrible things about yourself, and that can really eat away at you. I, for one, like was a little jealous at some point. It's just a minor thing. Like he's asked if he wants to go to the Catholic school in the neighborhood for middle school. I remember that mom asked him, and he goes, "No, I don't want to go there." It's like, all right, you'll go to the public middle school. I'm thinking to myself, if only. Like I went to Catholic school my whole life, so it's like resented. It's like, if only. It's like, oh, how lucky you are. Obviously, you know, things didn't turn out well in the other aspects for her. But it's like, just think of just even how much worse it would have been if she was in a Catholic school going through this kind of, you know, issues with her might have even taken her longer to reach this point, you know, of comfort at age 17, if she was somewhere else.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Greg. Sherry wrote in the chat that the key words from these chapters are essence and soul. And I think that I cannot agree more, you know, just like, and honestly, I'd add to that and I'd say like fearlessness. You know, it takes a certain amount of, you have to be completely fearless to be able to get on the internet in the early 2000s and meet up in the depths of New York City at a random hole in the wall Chinese restaurants and people you don't even know, you know. I think that all in the hopes and efforts to find yourself, you know, find who you are, find some people who you can ride with and that you can feel connected, find some people at very least who will come to your birthday party, you know what I'm saying? Like there was just something so nice about like that idea of kind of watching the fearlessness unfold.
And that fear, that fear can be paralyzing. You know, that stops most of us from like living our true selves and our true lives. You know, fear is no joke.
I mean,
and it could be just completely psychological, like the fear that you are putting on yourself that will not materialize if you just go after or if you just present yourself, your true self. But that psychological fear is paralyzing, or can be paralyzing.
We have a few more minutes. Does anyone who maybe hasn't said anything want to chime in on anything?
I have a question, even though I've already said something. Has anybody seen her in, what is it, Orange is the New Black?
Yeah, I have.
Really? I haven't watched it yet. I want to.
Oh yeah, I watched it when it came out. I was
And see, I was watching something else. That's the only reason why I didn't watch that.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. What
And
I
she
thought
did
was
a
really
lot of- Go ahead, Barbara.
sorry. What I was going to say is what I thought was really interesting when I started reading the book was, and I have watched the series, was the fact that her role that she plays in Orange is the New Black is very close to her role in real life. It's just like she plays like the mommy figure in prison and to her girls and her group of girls and stuff. So I thought that was really interesting. I caught on to that really quick when she was saying, oh, I was playing the mommy and taking care of my siblings and stuff like that. So
Yeah, really, definitely a tougher mom, though, Barbara, I would say, than she is in real life. If her depiction of herself in this book is, you know, true, I would say she was definitely a much tougher mom on the show. I think they're going to be joining us next week, aren't they, Ron?
So it's not next week, it's the following week, but they did notify us that they may have to change the date of the appearance. So we're trying to juggle their schedule now. So I'm not exactly sure. It was supposed to be the 24th, I believe, but they may push it back a week or try to schedule something during the week. The minute they're coordinating with Casita Maria, so the minute I know, I'll let you all know. Yeah, so that's like the best I could give you as far as when they will be here. But